What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Week 1 is finally here, and I could not be more excited, honestly. We are officially done with draft content. If you have a draft today, there are a million videos you can watch, prepare for that. In this one, we're going to be going over some players that you might want to be adding before week 1, either to stream at quarterback, stream at defense especially, or maybe because they're going to have a larger role in week 1, I believe, than the public thinks. And they're going to be the top players being added in week 2. So if you can get them before that happens, that's ideal. I am gearing this towards 12-team leagues. So just know that if you're in an 8-team league, you don't need to be targeting the players in this video. You probably don't even need to be looking at the free agency list. Your team's going to be fine. I would just skip to the quarterback streamers if you really need it somehow in an 8-team league, but really just the defense. You don't need to be doing waiver wire right now in an 8-team league. But for most of you, you're in 10, 12, 14, 16 team leagues. This video will be helpful for all of you. So we're going to go over all this in a second. First, have to start things off as usual, the stat of the day. Yesterday's stat was what team had the least fumbles lost per game last season. The answer was the Colts. Big Blue and a bunch of X's got that first on YouTube, and at Congrace15 was the first to get that right on Twitter. Today's stat: who had the longest kickoff return in the NFL last season? All right, let's start things off with what everyone wants to know, and that's who's going to be the top waiver wire ad at the running back position after week 1. Here are a few guys that I believe will be the most sought after people watch the games in week 1, realize how much people are used, realize who the number 2s are. And I'm only including running backs that are rostered at least, or I guess less than. So you got to be between 0 and 25%, somewhere in that range. So if there's a running back you really like, they're 40% owned, I'm not going to talk about them. They're not available in enough leagues. You got to be available in at least 75% of leagues. So here's the list: Tyson Williams, Tevin Coleman, Rhamondre Stevenson, Carlos Hyde, Damien Williams, Wayne Gallman, Tony Jones, and Jarrett Patterson. And the reasoning with, pretty much every single one of these backs is, roughly the same. They all have different characteristics that we'll go over, but the overarching reasoning is that people will watch the games. Everyone wants to watch week 1, right? Football's finally back. And they're going to see that the running backs in this list, they're going to have a much larger role than the public is expecting. And then when you see that, you're going to start to understand the upside if the starter goes down. The one exception here is Tevin Coleman. I think it's possible. Now, the Jets' backfield is a complete mess. So I'm not saying we were really wanting all the Jets, right? But because it's a mess, I think it's possible Tevin Coleman comes out and just straight up leads the backfield in touches. And whenever that happens, you just have an NFL team, there's a running back leading in touches, everyone's going to want them in fantasy, obviously, because they're the lead back on a team. And so that's why I think he could be the top guy. But if Tevin Coleman comes out and he's behind Ty Johnson and Michael Carter, no one's adding Tevin Coleman. So this is one that if you believe he's the guy, you want to get ahead of things. If he goes out there and he has 15 touches in week 1, everyone's going to want Tevin Coleman. So that's the one where it's I don't think it's more backup situation. Everyone else here is more backup. But again, he's honestly probably the least appealing for me among everyone in this backfield, or everyone in this list. Even though because he could be a 1 and everyone else is a 2, it's just where's the upside, right? Because I don't see a situation where Tevin Coleman goes out there and he's a running back 1, even really a consistent running back 2. I just thought I'd mention him because if you do need points, I know some people, maybe you went with anchor running back, maybe you're in a 16-team league and you just need production at the running back position. I think he's going to have production, and I think people are going to want him in week 2. Just personally, if we're stashing players, let's go with the rest of this list for stashes. So the other guys I'm more excited about. Tyson Williams, he is the running back 2 in Baltimore, especially with the Justice Hill injury, him being done for the season. Realistically, he was before that, though. I had Hill projected for 15 or 20 points over the entire season. He was not going to be a huge factor. They have praised Williams all of camp. Williams is also the mold that they want. They're never going to give Justice Hill a ton of carries. They're never going to give any running back a ton of receptions. So the role just didn't fit for Justice Hill. But for Williams, it does, and they seem to have a lot of faith in him. I know that they're trying out other running backs. When this goes up, it's possible that they've signed one of them. But to me, number one, like Justice Hill got hurt like over a week ago at this point, or roughly a week ago at this point, and they're just starting to bring guys in, like days before week one. To me, this is just depth. This is them saying, okay, well, we only have 2 running backs right now that we even trust at all. We need a third. Like, we need people. But I don't think this is them saying, oh, no, Justice Hill was going to be a 2. We don't care about Williams. We need someone else to come in and be the 2. So I personally think these tryouts are just filling depth. I'm not worried about them. I still believe that Tyson Williams is the 2 on this team, and he's going to get a lot more carries than people are envisioning. Rhamondre Stevenson is a name that you should expect to see if you've watched my videos for a while. I've taken him in 2 out of 2 leagues so far. Tonight for me, I have my 3rd league. It'll be, yesterday night for you guys. Realistically, I will probably not take him because I don't want any player in like all 3 leagues. But I really, really like him. He will not have a large role to start the season. So this is one where it's possible he comes out there and he has 4 carries. And the public is like, oh, okay, so he's nothing, right? But there are definitely scenarios where he has like 4 carries this week, and then 5 carries, and then 7 carries, and then he like slowly starts to build a role because, I mean, you got to earn your role on the Patriots. They don't just give it to you. Bill's not just giving it to anyone. But know that like you're owning Stevenson for the upside, right? It's if Damien Harris goes down, Stevenson is like a running back 1 or a high-end running back 2, and that's not something you can say about a lot of teams. And then he still has that upside if Harris doesn't go down. If Stevenson is just playing really well down the stretch of the season, they've got a good enough offensive line. They are a run-first offense. He could have some really, really nice weeks, even if he's not the clear 1. Carlos Hyde, he's the clear number 2 in Jacksonville. He also has a connection with the coaching staff. Of course, he played for Urban Meyer at Ohio State. Teams have also historically just like given Carlos Hyde more touches than they probably should. He's just a player that every team he seems to go on, they're just giving him a workload. And so I would not be surprised if I see Carlos Hyde go out there and approach 10 carries in week 1. Now, that is probably a stretch. I would expect him to be below that mark. But if he went out there, and especially week 1, I mean, they're playing Houston, right? It's like one of the worst teams in football. The line's only 2.5. It's completely ridiculous. I would absolutely be smashing that. But they could stomp Houston, right, in week 1. And if Carlos Hyde goes out there and he has a lot of carries, he scores a touchdown, everyone is going to want him because then envision the scenario. James Robinson gets hurt. I mean, now Hyde is a really, really valuable piece in fantasy, and he's a name people have heard in the past. So I think that he could have a lot of carries in week 1. He could easily score a touchdown. And I would definitely be wanting him on my team if you like need a late round running back stash. Damien Williams in a similar boat. He's not playing for his old college head coach, but I have seen some trustworthy sources say that he's going to be more involved than people think he'll be, especially while Cohen remains sidelined, because of course Cohen's going to miss at least the first 6 weeks of the season. Williams has been, not only good on the ground, but he's been capable in the receiving game. They've praised how quick he's been, how explosive he's been. And so if he comes out there in week 1 and he plays on some third downs, not all of them, he's not going to play on all of them, but if he comes in, he plays some third downs, we see him get some carries, maybe he scores a touchdown, but even if he doesn't score a touchdown, then we see Fields maybe announce a starter in week 2, this offense is trending up. People are easily going to talk themselves in to Damien Williams, just because we've seen it before. He's been very productive in fantasy. And if Montgomery went down, Williams could be a featured back. We've already seen him be a featured back in the past. And so that could be a player also that I'd want to be stashing. The last 3 are reserved for more deeper formats. So Wayne Gallman, Tony Jones Jr., and Jaret Patterson. Gallman and Patterson are, in my opinion, the clear running back 2s on their respective teams, so the Falcons and the football team, and they would be very highly coveted if there's an injury in week 1 to the starters over there. Then I honestly think that Tony Jones Jr. might be the number 2 in New Orleans. They very nearly cut Latavius Murray, and they clearly don't love him. So with Jones playing so well in the preseason, with the reports seeming to back that up, that he could be the number 2, I think a lot of people just grab Latavius Murray because they just assume that he's the handcuff. He's always been the handcuff, right? But they don't really want Latavius Murray, if we're being honest. And Tony Jones played really, really well this summer. And so maybe, if someone else took Latavius Murray, Tony Jones is probably on free agency in a ton of leagues, pretty much every single league. And you want that handcuff. If you don't have Kamara, you just want a high upside piece. I think he can be a name because he could, think about, they're not going to give Kamara 25 carries a game, right? And there's still going to be an offense that wants to run the ball. They still want to run the football, even switching over to Jameis. And because of that, their number 2 is still going to be involved. Whoever wins that role is going to get carries every single week. And if he's looking good in week 1, he's getting carries, and people can talk themselves into, oh my goodness, Kamara goes down, Tony Jones, yeah, he's going to be a really, really targeted piece on free agency. So let's move on to the wide receivers. And again, only talking about players who are owned in 25% or fewer of ESPN leagues. We got Sterling Shepard, Terrace Marshall Jr., Emmanuel Sanders, Bryan Edwards, Rondell Moore, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and Quez Watkins. And if you're in a super deep league, a 16-team league, all those guys are already taken. How about Josh Palmer, D. Eskridge, Quintez Cephas, and Diami Brown? Those are a few more names that for sure I would say week 1 are not going to be super highly coveted. I do not see any of them having, 8, 9 targets in week 1, hauling in 6, 7 receptions, or I don't think any of these guys go for 100 in a score. I would say the most likely is Cephas and Brown, just because they're big play threats. But if Diami Brown has 100 yards and a touchdown, I personally think it only came on 2 or 3 receptions, and I don't think people are going out of their way to get him to free agency. Maybe they would, but I just think those are guys that maybe midway through and down the stretch of the season, they can carve out a really nice role, especially someone like Palmer. That Mike Davis is not, at least I don't think he's in the future plans for the Chargers. I think they want Palmer to be the 2 next season, and he's clearly the 3 right now. And so if they want to start using him a little bit more as the season progresses, or we see an injury to Mike Williams, I think he could be really valuable. Eskridge, of course, is on Seattle. If he has any sort of talent, that's going to come out on Seattle. It's a really good offense. Cephas, kind of in that rotation for the Lions, but we know the Lions are going to have to throw the ball a lot. We know they don't have that much talent, and so it wouldn't take a lot to break out on the Lions because you don't have to be that good to get a lot of playing time. And then Brown kind of just talked about, I want pieces on the Washington football team. Definitely week 1, not a fantastic matchup, which we'll get into when we talk about the quarterback streamers. But still a name that I think is very talented on offense. I think will be better than people think, and so he could absolutely break out. But going back to the names that we talked about first, these are the guys that I would target most heavily if you did find them on free agency. I'll start with Sterling Shepard. He could pretty easily lead this team in receptions. We've got Evan Ingram, Golladay, Barkley. They're all going to be limited or out to start the season. I don't think Ingram is going to play in week 1. I'm not 100% sure on Golladay. I think we'll find out later in the week. I think Barkley will play, but he's going to be limited. You've got Slayton, who is never and has never been a target hog. He's just not going to get a ton of targets. Kadarius Toney, he missed most of camp on the COVID IR with a hamstring injury. He's not going to be a target hog. And this is a bad team overall, so they're going to be playing from behind a lot. He's got a brutal week 1 matchup against the Broncos, so definitely possible that just no one has a good game in week 1. But I do think people are going to see Shepard's clearly the most targeted weapon, and he's on free agency. Oh, look, they have much easier matchups after this, and it's going to be very easy to talk yourself into Shepard in week 2. Terrace Marshall, Bryan Edwards, Emmanuel Sanders are 3 wide receivers that I've talked about at length this last month, so I don't want to go in depth on all of them and bore you guys. I've literally talked about them twice a week for a month now. But just to very, very quickly summarize these 3 players, you've got Marshall, of course, 2nd round rookie on the Panthers. He's got the size, the athleticism, the talent, and the opportunity, clearly being the number 3. He's just got everything going for him this season. 1 injury just catapults him in the target share, and he could legitimately lead this team in receiving touchdowns, given that Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, they're not touchdown threats, right? They're really good receivers, but they're not touchdown threats. And so I think that Marshall's going to have a better season than the public thinks. Bryan Edwards, clearly the X receiver on the Raiders, and that'll be on full display Monday night. So if you're like eyeing Bryan Edwards and you're like, I don't know if I want him right now, maybe I just wait for him to break out, understand that like, I think the Ravens have a really good defense, so I'm not saying he's going to break out in week 1. But if he has a good game at all, everyone's going to see it. It is the only Monday night game this week. I don't know why they did that. Every year they seem to do 2 Monday night games, which I kind of prefer. I don't know. They went back to 1 Monday night game. All eyes are going to be on this game. And it's not like a fantastic game. I think it's a good one. I think it's like going to be a close game. I think it's going to have shootout potential. It's probably going to be, I would guess that line is like 50 or 51 points. So like a higher scoring game. But I think it's going to be a good game overall. So people are going to want to watch it, especially with the Ravens. They're going to want to see Lamar Jackson. And I think if Bryan Edwards goes out there and he looks really good, everyone's going to be watching and everyone's going to want him the next week. So if you want Bryan Edwards, you think he breaks out, I think you got to get him before that potentially happens. Now, again, he could dud. It could just be a bad game for Oakland overall. But I'm not taking that risk. If he's on free agency in a league, and he's not because I own him in every league, but if he's on free agency in a format, then pick him up because I think you're going to want him. Kind of the same thing for Emmanuel Sanders. He's going to be such a pivotal part of this offense. Not only is it a high-scoring offense, not only is it going to lean extremely pass-heavy, they're going to lean pass-heavy even when they're winning. Right? This isn't a team that like takes their foot off the pedal, then runs the ball in the second half. They're going to score and score and score and score. It's all coming through the air unless Josh Allen runs one in. So given that they're also moving Sanders around the formation, they've talked about how much they love him this offseason. Like, Sanders is a slam dunk pick, and if you see him on free agency, he needs to be on your roster. The other three, Rondale Moore, MVS, Quez Watkins, they're more secondary options if you like are just looking for an upside piece on your bench. I would say that all three of them do have capped ceilings. You have that first group I talked about. I think all of them could just break out this season and be great. But like all of these three have like question marks. Like Rondale Moore is extremely talented. He'll be used on screen passes. Just plays designed to get him the ball very, very quickly, get the ball into his hands in space. But like they have Hopkins. They've got Kyler running the ball. They've got AJ Green. So it's like that he still has a lot of people ahead of him. I just think he's a great talent and you're going to want him in a deeper format. Quez Watkins, I guess similar. It's like he's competing with Rager for the 2. He's still going to play in the slot a ton. And he's a great deep threat. So he can like hit big on a few weeks. His issue is that like, Devonta Smith is the 1 and they've got Goddard and they've got Ertz. So like, in a 10 or 12 team league, you're probably not looking at Quez Watkins. But as we move deeper than that, I think he's going to be a player that is used much more than people are assuming right now. And then MVS, probably the one I'm most excited about among this grouping. Not a lot of people are talking about him, but he's the number 2 on the Packers. Obviously, like you want the number 2 for Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers has been praising him in camp. We know how important that is. Like Rodgers just won't throw to you if he doesn't like you, right? And so he's been praising him. He clearly likes Marquez Valdez-Scantling. He's clearly improved as a player. And we know he's a deep threat. We know he's very talented. And so if they can kind of put that together this season and he can be a consistent deep threat on this team that Rodgers trusts, oh my goodness. I mean, the upside is crazy. Next up, we're going to do some quarterback streamers. This one's going to be a little short just because, like, it's week 1, right? Like, who are you streaming? Like, did you really start the season with, like, the 20th best quarterback and now you have to stream? Like, odds are you can just skip over this part and go to the defense streamers because that might be more relevant to you. But if you had a bad draft and you really need a streamer, 3 names are Sam Darnold, Carson Wentz, and Ryan Fitzpatrick. Darnold gets a home matchup with the Jets. This game only has a 45-point total. I would definitely take the over on that. I think this game has more shootout potential than that line indicates. These are not elite defenses. Both offenses are at the very least capable. I'm not going to say they're fantastic, but they're definitely capable. Darnold will also be facing his old team, so that's a nice little like revenge narrative for you. But more seriously, like look at his weapons, right? And look at the matchup. It's just that combination, like McCaffrey, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, Terrace Marshall. Like he's got a lot of weapons around him, and it's the Jets, right? And he's at home. And so I think that Sam is not that great, but you could do a lot worse if you were desperate this week. Carson Wentz gets a home matchup with Seattle. That game has had its total rise to 49, so bettors are assuming this is going to be a higher scoring game. I do expect the Colts to run the ball a lot. That doesn't mean the touchdowns can't come through the air, and it doesn't mean that, they can't be trailing, because like Seattle is favored. It's not by a lot, so that's actually another good thing. Like if the total is rising and Seattle's only a 2.5-point favorite, that means bettors are also saying that like the Colts are going to score points too. But the market seems to think that like Seattle's going to get ahead and that the Colts are going to catch up, right? And that's good for the quarterback. The last name I'd look at is Fitz. Whole matchup, but it's against the Chargers. It's a game that has a low total, and I expected to have a low total. Plus, the line's been moving towards the Chargers, which is not great. So I would say that if you are looking to stream Fitz, it's definitely fine, because there is a path to Herbert just being really good, to just forcing this game into a shootout, and Fitz being aggressive and contributing to that shootout, and then this game ends up like 35-31, something like that. But I think the most likely outcome is still that it's like 24-20, and that maybe Fitz only has closer to like 250 yards, and maybe he gets 2 touchdowns with like no rushing. And so that's not great. But if you're super, super desperate, I do think Fitz is viable, because he is always viable, right? You can always shoot out. Final thing we'll do today is the defense streamers. There are actually not a ton of great options in week 1. 3 stand out to me. One of them you definitely drafted if you used my rankings. And the other 2 are definitely on free agency for most leagues, so you should have an option here. So if you use the rankings, the only defense listed at a target, but definitely the only core pick was the Broncos. They have an elite defense this season, and they open week 1 against a turnover-prone Daniel Jones with Saquon limited, with Golladay and Ingram's health in question. Maybe both don't play, but at least Ingram's probably not playing. Like, this is a recipe for disaster for New York. And so if they're somehow on free agency, use them, but hopefully you just use the rankings and you drafted the Broncos. The 2 other defenses are the Vikings and the Jaguars. Neither of them is an elite defense, but the Vikings get to take on the Bengals, who are like a good offense, but one, they had a really, really bad preseason, and so that could carry over to like start the season. I think they'll end and be middle like really, really strong, but maybe it takes them a few weeks to kind of get back together. The offensive line is improved, but it's not that good, and so there's sack potential there. And then also the Bengals just like to throw the ball, and teams that throw the ball more give up more sacks, especially when their offensive line isn't that good. And so a lot of sack potentials for the Vikings. And then obviously with the Jaguars, it's like we're not going to be using the Jaguars defense all that much this season for streaming, but we're going to be streaming whatever defense is playing the Texans. Now, Tyrod Taylor, it's kind of like we want to be targeting Tyrod's offense here, because his skill players are garbage. His team is just not good. They're not going to score points. The one issue is that Tyrod historically has not turned the ball over that much, and so we're not anticipating a ton of like fumbles and interceptions. But their offensive line is so bad, and the Jaguars' defense is good enough, and the Jaguars are likely, I think, to win this game. It's only a 2.5-point line. I think I said that earlier, but I think the Jaguars really come out strong in this game and win handily. And if you look at this offense, it's like, what are they going to do? I mean, so I don't think they're going to score many points. I think that the Jaguars are on free agency in like pretty much every league. And with there not being that many good matchups this week, if you can have the one playing the worst team in the NFL, I would do it. So I would go after them simply because of that offensive line, defensive line matchup. Not a good offensive line. They're not going to score many points. And so I think it's a safe pick to make. So that'll do it for the week 1 waiver wire options. We will have start sit videos for you the rest of the week. So make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you click the bell notification to know when those are up. And make sure you check out the week 1 rankings on the website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. The initial rankings were posted on Monday, but check back now, check back later in the week, because I'll be posting the better rankings. I just post initial ones because you guys get a little anxious. You really want to see what the rankings are, but I update them throughout the week and I post the better ones like Wednesday, Thursday. And so check back, because they're going to be much, much better than what you initially saw on like Monday and Tuesday. But that, my friends, is the end of this one. Hope you all enjoy. If you did, then how about hitting that like button, and how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? Thanks for watching.